what does the future look like in terms of increasing people's access? Or if you look at IoT, Internet of Things, there's more and more intelligent devices. You can see there's some people even talking about our personal data as a thing that we could monetize more explicitly versus implicitly. Sort of everything can become part of the economy. Do you see, so what does the future of Square look like in sort of giving people access in all kinds of ways to being part of the economy as merchants and as consumers?
I believe that the currency we use is a huge part of the answer. And I believe that the internet deserves and requires a native currency. And that's why I'm such a huge believer in Bitcoin, because it just, our biggest problem as a company right now is we cannot act like an internet company. Open a new market, we have to have a partnership with a local bank. We have to pay attention to different regulatory onboarding environments. And a digital currency like Bitcoin takes a bunch of that away, where we can potentially launch a product in every single market around the world, because they're all using the same currency. And we have consistent understanding of regulation and onboarding and what that means. So I think the internet continuing to be accessible to people is number one, and then I think currency is number two. And it will just allow for a lot more innovation, a lot more speed in terms of what we can build and others can build, and it's just really exciting. So I mean, I want to be able to see that and feel that in my lifetime.
So in this aspect and in other aspects, you have a deep interest in cryptocurrency and distributed ledger tech in general. I talked to Vitalik Buterin yesterday on this podcast. He says hi, by the way.
Hey.
He's a brilliant person. Talked a lot about Bitcoin and Ethereum, of course. So can you maybe linger on this point? What do you find appealing about Bitcoin, about digital currency? Where do you see it going in the next 10, 20 years? And what are some of the challenges with respect to Square, but also just bigger for our globally, for our world, for the way we think about money?
I think the most beautiful thing about it is there's no one person setting the direction. And there's no one person on the other side that can stop it. So we have something that is pretty organic in nature and very principled in its original design. I think the Bitcoin white paper is one of the most seminal works of computer science in the last 20, 30 years. It's poetry. I mean,
it's
it really
pretty
is.
Cool technology. I mean, that's not often talked about. Sort of, there's so much sort of hype around digital currency, about sort of the financial impacts of it, but the actual technology is quite beautiful from a computer science perspective.
Yeah, and the underlying principles behind it that went into it, even to the point of releasing it under a pseudonym. I think that's a very, very powerful statement. The timing of when it was released is powerful. It was a total activist move. I mean, it's moving the world forward in a way that I think is extremely noble and honorable and enables everyone to be part of the story, which is also really cool. So you asked a question around 10 years and 20 years. I mean, I think the amazing thing is no one knows. And it can emerge, and every person that comes into the ecosystem, whether they be a developer or someone who uses it, can change its direction in small and large ways. And that's what I think it should be, because that's what the internet has shown is possible. Now there's complications with that, of course, and there's certainly companies that own large parts of the internet and can direct it more than others, and there's not equal access to every single person in the world just yet, but all those problems are visible enough to speak about them, and to me that gives confidence that they're solvable in a relatively short time frame. I think the world changes a lot as we get these satellites projecting the internet down to Earth, because it just removes a bunch of the former constraints and really levels the playing field. But a global currency, which a native currency for the internet is a proxy for, is a very powerful concept. And I don't think any one person on this planet truly understands the ramifications of that. I think there's a lot of positives to it. There's some negatives as well.
Do you think it's possible, sorry to interrupt, do you think it's possible that this kind of digital currency would redefine the nature of money, so become the main currency of the world as opposed to being tied to fiat currency of different nations, and sort of really push the decentralization of control of money?
Definitely. But I think the bigger ramification is how it affects how society works. And I think there are many positive ramifications
Outside of just
that.
Money.
Outside of just money. Money is a foundational layer that enables so much more. I was meeting with an entrepreneur in Ethiopia, and payments is probably the number one problem to solve across the continent, both in terms of moving money across borders between nations on the continent, or the amount of corruption within the current system. But the lack of easy ways to pay people makes starting anything really difficult. I met an entrepreneur who started the Lyft/Uber of Ethiopia, and one of the biggest problems she has is that it's not easy for her riders to pay the company, and it's not easy for her to pay the drivers. And that definitely has stunted her growth and made everything more challenging. So the fact that she even has to think about payments instead of thinking about the best rider experience and the best driver experience is pretty telling. So I think as we get a more durable, resilient, and global standard, we see a lot more innovation everywhere. And I think there's no better case study for this than the various countries within Africa and their entrepreneurs who are trying to start things within health or sustainability or transportation, or a lot of the companies that we've seen here. So the majority of companies I met in November when I spent a month on the continent were payments oriented.
You mentioned, as a small tangent, you mentioned the anonymous launch of Bitcoin is a sort of profound philosophical statement.
Pseudonymous.
What's that even mean? There's a pseudonym. First
well,
of all,
there's an identity tied to it. It's not just anonymous. It's Nakamoto. So Nakamoto might represent one person or multiple people. But
let me ask: are you Satoshi Nakamoto? Just
no.
checking.
If I were, would I tell you?
Yeah, that's true.
But
maybe you slip.
A pseudonym is constructed identity. Anonymity is just kind of this, random, like drop something off and leave. There's no intention to build an identity around it. And while the identity being built was a short time window, it was meant to stick around, I think, and to be known. And it's being honored in how the community thinks about building it. Like the concept of Satoshis, for instance, is one such example. But I think it was smart not to do it anonymous, not to do it as a real identity, but to do it as a pseudonym because I think it builds tangibility and a little bit of empathy that this was a human or a set of humans behind it. And there's this natural identity that I can imagine.
But there is also a sacrifice of ego. That's a pretty powerful thing.